And we're live, just like that. It's Matt Cundill, Sarah Burke on a
This
Sunday.
is a radio backsell here. I love it.
I know. Well, I don't get to play radio as much anymore. In fact, I don't get to play it at all.
It's nice to see you. I mean, we have seen each other on FaceTime a few times over the last few weeks, but
yeah, and it's a great time to get together. And one of the things I wanted to do was, this is my pandemic project, is to just go live on the internet because I was at home all the time. And I really enjoy going out and interviewing people with microphones, and I like doing podcasts that way. But if you're stuck at home, it was an opportunity to really bring back people who've been on the show before without having to do a whole show and saying, "Hey, so like, what's new?"
Yeah.
So we get.
How long has it been since I was on your podcast? 2018, was it?
Yeah, one of those years, 2018, 2019, and as you continue to do these things, you look back and you realize you haven't had somebody on since like 3.5 years. And it's been, I think, since 2018, since you and I were on, and I titled the show Seriously Sarah, which I thought was incredibly clever.
Bad joke, but okay.
And there you are, you're on Sirius XM, and you're doing a lot of interviewing and talking to bands all the time and enjoying the Sunday service. And so how's it been since we last spoke?
I don't think a lot of people would know that show and my hosting is like this much of what I do at SiriusXM these days. It's a lot has changed actually since we talked. So I think at the last time I would have spoken to you, I was talking about how I wanted to like try and lead a team or become a program director or something like that. And I guess that sort of happened now in a way. So I'm managing our Canadian music department, and there's various partnerships underneath the 14 channels, but there's French channels, there's English channels. I have a team of 2, and we are small but mighty.
That's an awful lot of music to schedule. I can tell you're doing some because of whatever you were applying to yourself beforehand was Music Master promo gear.
Yeah. Hold on. Where did it go?
Yes.
Music Master chapstick. This is the one that I just keep near my desk. You need one everywhere.
And so congratulations, by the way, on doing all that stuff at Sirius. And
thank you.
You called me a few weeks ago and you said you were going to be starting a podcast. And I think this is, a great idea that you're doing this. It's the Women in Media podcast. So tell me how the idea came to fruition. I know you were doing a podcast at one time involving some music and artists and interviewing, but how'd this one come about?
Honestly, I think something clicked like about a month and a half ago, and I'm a very indecisive person. I like having my hands in various things, and sometimes I have trouble focusing because of that. Never been diagnosed with anything, but I wonder. And, I've had 3 or 4 podcast ideas during the pandemic, I'd say. I have like these nights where I write a whole journal page of ideas down, and then like 3 days later, you're like, that wasn't really a good idea. So many moments like that. And then, out of nowhere, I was asking myself, like, what do I actually care about? Because yes, I care about music, but music is so wide. And obviously I work in music. There's so many different angles in music, but I think what I arrived at was that, every woman in this industry has something to share, something we can all learn from. And the one thing in common, I think, with all of us is that whether things are going good or bad, it's happening to you near or in the spotlight, which I say in my trailer. It's really interesting trying to figure out where you went wrong when people are watching, or when you did a really good job and people are talking about it.
Yeah. And, I interview, men and women for my podcast, and, everybody's in media or broadcast, but the questions are inherently different between men and women, because women will often have a story. And I just looked back a couple of weeks ago, I had Lisa Guerrero on, and she talked about, a toxic work environment at Fox Sports. Sharon Taylor talked a lot about women's issues, as she's trying to steer through it and grow her career. So, there's an imbalance right there. And the stories are just fundamentally different.
Yeah. And it even starts fundamentally, it starts at our physiology. Okay. So I think actually the guest that I have coming tomorrow for the episode coming out for International Women's Day, I think puts it really well, that a lot of the time, women think of their female isms as a setback or a disadvantage. but she's talking about leaning into them. And by the way, you should definitely catch that episode. It's with Tracy Martin, who is the president of the CCMA, and she's fantastic. But our physiology means that, like, hey, I'm just going to be real about this, but once a month, we're just feeling shitty. And there are several things that play around that. Sometimes, your reactions are controlled in your physiology to things. And there's a lot of compassion, I think, for all sorts of things, whether it's financial equality or, the types of names that women get called in the media. There's lots of compassion out there, but there's everyday little things too that we just don't really think about.
Well, the phones are different. So, I mean, you having answered phones and done a shift when you were at FM 96, you got those live phones going. Your phone calls are going to be different. Your DMs are inherently different.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Well, tell people what's in them.
Well, lately things are very nice in there. Men and women, I would say, are like, I don't have anyone bothering me, but like, if I think back to, doing a live rock radio show at FM 96, that's when I really felt, I think, what you're getting at there. And that's when during my live broadcast, you would have some drunk idiot like flying into your microphone trying to scream, "Better in the pussy," like that all happened. And it's happened to so many women. But yeah, I think 2020 and 2021, there's something happening. I'm not feeling that right now at all.
So here's a stray, by the way. So from Kyle Easton, how about FM 96 play some metal?
Yeah, I'll just call them right up.
You're still getting the same request you've always had.
Yeah, is it Sabbath or what are you looking for?
You touched on change, for 2020 and 2021. But there's an awful lot of change that's obviously taken place since the pandemic started. Now, I was listening, I think, recently to CBC Under the Influence, and Terry O'Reilly was talking about all the, getting rid of all the racist names out of sports. So what were you alluding to when you're talking about change between 2020, 2021?
Just, I think men right now, unfortunately, are intimidated and afraid sometimes to do the things that they maybe would have done without thinking years ago. And the media is what has all these movements, whether it be Me Too or something else, all of these movements have made everyone hyper aware. And that's where it all starts. That's why I think it's improving. But is there so much work to be done? Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's in all facets, right? It's in the workplace. It's online. It's, socially, in person. I mean, we're still having Andrew Cuomo seems a little bit behind the times. Just the way.
I didn't think we were going to talk about Andrew Cuomo on this.
Well, you mentioned something that feels, for that behavior feels very, very dated.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you and I did a little bit of back and forth on the podcast, and thank you, by the way, just for calling me up to ask questions, because I get excited anytime somebody has like a passion project. But I was really surprised that when I said passion project, I called it a passion project. It's probably not. This is probably.
I don't know what this was compared to like today versus a month ago. I'll get to what you convinced me to think it was.
Yeah.
in a minute, but yeah,
it's a good idea. But when I went searching for, like any form of podcast like this, emanating from Canada, there wasn't a lot, and the space is really wide open. And I mention this because, in podcasts, it's like, oh, I'm going to start a poker podcast. Well, there's 80 poker podcasts. And so, but there's really not a lot like the show that you're doing.
Yeah. And I think that's what was wrong with my previous attempts at podcasts, whether it's like putting your best of content of a radio show in a place where anyone can find like those best of clips at the end of the week, or, I did a podcast called Bands and Buds, which was so wide open and not very intentional, although it was so much fun, because I've always loved interviewing. That's what the core of it was about. But this is specific. I want to talk to you, but I want to talk to you about these things. And I don't think I knew what I wanted to talk about in a given podcast, which is why it's taken me so long to get here. I can't believe I didn't do this earlier, but yeah, it takes time to like figure out in your head what you want. So
I don't think you're any different than anybody else. It just takes a long time to, you were talking a bit earlier about how our brains work, but I think you've been writing and thinking about the show for a long time. Then all of a sudden, and it has moved fast. I don't think I've seen a podcast get launched this quickly.
Yeah. Sometimes when I'm like, Yeah, I'm good under pressure. I also procrastinate a lot though. So these two things, they just work hand in hand.
Is that the nature of the business that we're in? I mean, having, been in radio, it's due at 6 o'clock. You're going on the air at a certain time, and you just came from a bike ride today, for instance. So,
Yeah.
while you're biking, are you writing? Because I find I'm writing while I'm running or biking or playing a soccer game. I'm thinking about that next episode or that next show. You're on a lot, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm definitely on a lot. That's for sure. And I think it's important to like listen back to, like, I actually just listened over on my bike ride. Yes, I had some music going one way, which was a lot harder against the wind than the other way. But I listened to the episode that's going to come out tomorrow to reflect, to think about how I'm asking questions. And this is a different kind of interviewing, right? I'm used to interviewing people about songs. Now I'm interviewing people about their life. Like I know musicians, obviously, when you're interviewing them about their songs, there's their life in that song or in that album or whatever it is. But this is about like people's paths and their journey to how we know them in the industry. So it's very different for me.
I had that actually marked down as a question, like the differences between interviewing a band, and you've done so many interviews, with bands, but now you're going to be interviewing. Some are friends and some are people that you've heard of, or maybe you've been referred to along the way. How are you going to approach each interview?
Yeah, like the first episode with Josie, I thought that would be easy because we know each other and we have known each other now for a long time. But I found it really easy to interview Tracy Martin, who I don't know that well at all. I knew she was, a kick-ass woman in the industry that I wanted on the podcast. I knew her general resume, but I mean, I could have talked to her for hours. It was easy. It's just like coming out.
When you were on that bike ride and you listened back to the interview, what were your critiques about yourself? Because you're self-checking.
Yeah. What were my critiques about myself in this? I say I know a lot, like crutch words. That's dumb though. That's like nothing I'm too concerned with. But if anything, I actually felt better about it than most things I listen back to, even my weekly radio show. And I think I noticed myself listening in a different way, where normally I'm concerned with being the host and like interjecting and saying something like that proves I'm the host. It's listening and thinking of thoughtful reactions to what they say to get you into your next question. So I actually felt pretty good about it.
You can edit this stuff, if you don't like it, you can edit it.
Yeah.
Do you think that you would, I think I'm going to edit that out, or?
I think I want this also to be a safe place for women to speak about their stories. And believe me, I'm the first person to say, stop worrying about what everyone else thinks. But if someone doesn't want something in there, I will absolutely do an edit, because this is not the type of podcast where I'm looking to talk shit, as much as it may look like that to some people who don't know enough about it. This is like, let's have like better discussions between men and women, but also between women and women, which is a big theme that's coming out too.
I was just thinking about taking out the ums and the ahs and the I knows.
Oh, no, I'm over that. There was a time, don't get me wrong, there was a time where I edited out every stupid, dumb thing in whatever you were hearing on the air at FM 96 or whatever. But yeah.
Why'd you stop? I can't stop. I'm just so picky. I just take it all out.
I just don't care anymore. If people like what the topic of conversation is, the doesn't matter. And that's the difference right there, I think, between radio and podcasting right there. Radio, even me saying I have a crutch is like, oh, well, when you listen to your friends' conversations, yeah, everyone has things they say all the time, but you're not going to tell your friend when he speaks he has a crush, or your girlfriend that she said too many times, right? It's supposed to be like you're just talking.
So I listened to the first episode, which was with Josie, and it's kind of monumental because here we are like a year later, and I had her on my podcast exactly a year ago.
Okay.
And that was the episode where everything before that episode and before is pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
And everything after that is all pandemic. And of course she had a harrowing tale coming back from where she had gone to, and then needed to come back. And of course everything had changed from that point. Well, what about for you? working from home, how did your work life change?
I think a lot of it is personal for me more than it is my work life, because leading up to this point, I was working from hotel rooms a lot of the time, like when you're going to conferences or festivals, or like it was just something that I was used to, logging in remotely on VPN and jumping on, doing your edits, doing, interviews even for my show, Sunday Service, at a festival weekend, and finding a way to put it in, like I was used to that. What I wasn't used to was not having gym, work, show, gym again in the morning. Like that whole thing, my life is so different right now than it was a year ago, especially because we're coming up on that week that everything changed. And yeah, I don't get me wrong, I still don't sleep as much as I should. And it's not for the best reasons, because clearly I'm just home. But, I think when the world returns to normal, I'm going to be way more intentional with what I choose to participate in and what shows are important to me. There's a big part of my job that's kind of schmoozing, right? And I love it. Don't get me wrong, I love all of that. But you can't do it every night and still feel whole at the end of the week. You can't.
I miss those schmoozing days too. When there were 7 record companies, it was 7 nights a week out. There's a lot less now. So
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about video, because you've done a great job with just using video to promote the podcast. I saw some stuff with just you and Josie talking, which is in all the on the Instagram and the Twitter streams, which everybody should follow and subscribe to right away, by the way. So,
yeah. Oh my God. It's like sometimes when you see, you're like, oh, I have 15 followers. Things are going really well. Good job. But yes, if you could follow along, if you're interested in this stuff, I don't want you following it if you're not interested, but if you are, then yeah.
In comes Jamie. It looks like there's already stuff coming here, some feedback. So
Jamie is a listener from London.
Yeah.
Nailed it. Unfiltered and unedited. Sarah's perfect. Wishing the best of the new adventure. Hoping it isn't long before Sherry Rains makes it on. Oh, Sherry Rains is the best. And definitely she's on my written guest list of people that I got to reach out to.
Do you have some people that you've already reached out to confirm? I mean, it's tough to say because all that sort of forward planning, but do you have a couple of episodes that are not in the podcast stream now, or the RSS feed that's coming?
Yes. And the only one I'm going to talk about right now is, well, I guess I could mention 2 others, I think. But yes, the episode tomorrow that I mentioned, Tracy Martin. What else? So Liz Trinier, who... Liz and I were summer cruiser personalities, driving the summer cruiser car around for Chorus Entertainment in London. That was my first year in radio, and we were really jealous of each other, which we're going to get right into on this podcast. I'm so excited for the episode because I feel like neither of us could have seen it at the time, how we should have just been like happy in our own skin. But that, when you're a young woman in this business, stuff is hard up here, for sure.
That's the theme that came up with Josie as well.
Yeah. It's like, again, it's all eyes on you when you're anywhere near a spotlight. And yeah, there were a lot of things that Liz and I could look back on now and learn from each other. So I'm really looking forward to that one. I'm going to talk to Meredith Shaw. So she's afternoons at Chum FM here in Toronto, and she is on TV with Marilyn Dennis. I think she's got a cooking show right now, which I need to hear more about, with her man, and she's plus size and so happy in her own skin as a model, and her message is just incredible. Again, someone I don't know at all, but I don't feel like it's going to be hard to talk about these things because these people are all, very talented in their fields.
Did you always have all that equipment at home to do interviews before the pandemic, or did most of it arrive after the pandemic started?
So I went from I would say shittier inputs to improving, the way that I connect in. So audio definitely improved. This mic is actually from the NHL Sirius XM studio, and I treat it like my baby. It has a case and, has to go away at the end of the night. But yeah, I'm on a brand new laptop that I bought for myself because yeah, I had a cracked screen for like 4 years, my last computer. But I decided, if I want to do any video, it needs to be as easy for me because I'm so busy with work usually. Like if I want to put up a video to support something, it can't be an uphill battle. It has to be easy. So I'm pretty well set up on that front now.
Yeah, I love how you're got this sort of fearlessness about video that I'm like freaked out about.
Why?
Just like can't edit video. That's just not a bucket I take from.
Well, I feel like I took a podcast course from you over the last week. I'll give you a quick video course, okay?
Okay, I'll take that.
Yeah.
I'd love to have that. So I want to know if that equipment being in your living room and in your workspace, did that lead to all the equipment sort of talking to you and say, hey, use me for podcast?
No.
Because that happened to me. I bought all this stuff and I was using it to stream stuff. And then I was, using some stuff for some voiceover. And then I would stare at it and would do nothing all damn. It's like, I guess I'll use it for podcasting.
Okay. So you know what? Now that I think of it, the birth of this podcast actually came from something so silly that my roommate at my apartment before this and it was the first week of the pandemic, actually, now that I think of it. We were sitting at home making dinner and we were, we always joked about being like, she's my wife, she's making me dinner, all those things. And we just had such a good routine where whoever was getting home from work later, the other person was preparing dinner or whatever, just supporting each other in our very busy work lives. And all of a sudden we were talking, and yeah, we had some red wine, but we were talking about how funny it would be to share the things we talk about at the dinner table. And at the time, we actually considered doing a podcast called Dinner Debrief. And I think that is where this came from. It fell off shortly after because she fell in love and, ended up moving in with this guy like really early on because they didn't want to like be double exposing me. They're both frontline essentially. She's a reporter and he's a paramedic. So I was left alone with my thoughts. And that's where I started thinking about podcasts from, at one point I wanted to do like morning coffee, morning buzz, after you have a toke or have your morning coffee, great conversation, like things just spiraled out of control. But I have arrived here with a little bit of this, and yeah.
Well, I love the idea. I think it's great. It's women in media. I've got the scroll going along the bottom there telling people to subscribe to it wherever you get your podcast, which is like the biggest catchphrase out there right now, but it's the truth. You subscribe or follow wherever you get your podcast. And women in media. And if you're not getting the result you want, I usually just add in Sarah Burke and it will pop up on just about any app now. So,
yeah, my roommate, by the way, will definitely, I can still call her my roommate, feel like she's here. She's not. But that's Morgan Campbell from Global News, and she will definitely have to come on later. She's been covering a pandemic. She's been covering all sorts of stuff over the last year, and her work ethic is I admire that woman so much.
And you're going to be doing episodes. I think it's going to be every 2 weeks.
Yes, every 2 weeks, bi-weekly. I thought that if I held myself accountable to 1 week, I might not sleep. So,
once a week is something. I'll tell you that much. I always love every second week or bi-weekly because it gives you extra time to market the show and gives you a little bit of a 14-day cycle to kick out some content.
Did you name yourself Podcast Wizard? That's cute. I like that.
I meant to name you something too, but I forgot. I got so hung up on the scroll.
Okay, I like Sarah Burke, period.
You want me to put a period in there?
No. This is good. This is good the way it is. Yeah. So are you going to drop anything about what's happening in your podcast world? Who's next for you?
Oh,
I'm asking about you.
Yes. Tomorrow. In fact, I was going to edit it today. I was like, I don't want to edit it today. Maybe I'll edit it. I got grumpy about it. And then I realized, I'm talking to Sarah at 6, but 6 is really 5 my time. So that kind of came up on me quickly. But Howard Kruger, who is I want to say he was the big creationist behind classic hits and, what we know as the Bob format where,
Bob or Jack or.
Yeah. The Jacks and the Joes that came from that. It's an episode I've always wanted to do. And he lives about 20 miles south of Winnipeg. I wanted to drive out and meet him. Still haven't met him, but we did it like we're doing now. And we went on for about 70 minutes about the format, how it all came together, a lot about his background as well. And what it was like. He played in the band in 1981. He opened for Harlequin. So he's got all those stories. We get knee deep into the Winnipeg stories, but you have to get knee deep into the Winnipeg stories to talk about this, because a classic hits format, which, we want to say came out of nowhere, really sort of a best of for Gen X and for the boomers. We felt it could only happen in Winnipeg. I think that's sort of how we concluded the episode, but that will be out sometime tomorrow.
Okay. All
Tomorrow,
right.
yeah, tomorrow being Monday.
I have a follow-up question actually too. In your time doing your podcast, do you find that you have like equal amount of opportunities to interview female guests as men? Is there not as many to choose from? What do you find?
It's radio. So, I mean, just by sheer numbers, there's more men, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I be it resolved a couple of years ago, I made a decision that you have to work harder to get females on the show. And so I bring that up about their DMs aren't necessarily open, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot easier. You just get a guide, send them a note. But a couple of the ones that you have to work harder to get them on and get their attention, to bring them on. That's just kind of, I mean, Lisa Guerrero is one that I've been dying to have her on for a while. And another one I had to work really hard at was Sunny Purick from a radio station in Washington, who I had to go through a couple of layers to get to get an email to her to get it. But she told a story about being 15 and not knowing any English and coming on the show.
Right.
And again, sometimes it's time restraints. You just Monday, Tuesday, got to get somebody on to do another one every week. We don't say no really to anybody, but sometimes it's just
it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
that's how I got on, isn't it?
Well, you know what? We don't really say no to anybody to coming on the show. We just reach out and just poke, and say, "Hey, can you come on the show and tell your story?" And some people are like, "Oh, I haven't been on. I can't believe you haven't asked me yet." And I'm like, "Well, it's forever."
And you have a link where it's like, "Hey, if you want to come on the show, click this thing." And yeah,
it's in the top. It's in the top right corner of of my website.
Mm-hmm.
Book yourself onto the show.
There you go. If you are really dying to go.
Yeah. I try really hard to make it so that anybody who wants to can come on the show, and just keep it as accessible and open as possible.
I'm trying to do, it's almost like a nomination process where, I'm asking the women at the end as we're wrapping up that are coming on the podcast, who else's stories need to be told here. So it's proving to be really interesting and a lovely way of sort of like passing it on to the next person.
Yeah. I sometimes feel like there is hide and seek that goes with it. Like, what story needs to be told, and you have to read and pay attention. Like, there's some people that I would never be on if I didn't get that story of the person who spent her teen years in a refugee camp, the story of Mel's on the mic down in Texas, who I think gave up his job as a truck driver to work in radio, and gave all that up. And I'm actually going to bring on somebody from his station probably in the next week or two. But it's sort of going in and finding that story. Okay, what's going to be interesting here?
Yeah, because people have so much to say. So
yeah.
Like I said in my trailer, I have not always been concise.
And you haven't run into the big issue, and that's you get the person you want, and then you can't make it work that week, or you can't make it work the next week. And the next thing you know, you've gone 4 years and your podcast still doesn't have Valerie Geller in it.
Valerie.
I know.
Come on, Val.
No, it's more Matt than it is Val.
Okay.
So it's kind of like we're just sort of passing ships from time to time in the night, but it's going to happen. We're going to make it happen. It's just the time will just happen when it happens.
Well, it's easier to book now that everyone is doing this for interviews at the moment. So,
not completely true, actually. Some people are zoomed out. Some people will limit the amount of times that they will get on this every day.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. A couple of people were like, sorry, I only do 2 Zooms a day and I'm done.
Yeah, a couple of the guests that I want to have on, like they've literally told me like I cannot commit to it until next month, and I'm like, don't worry, my March has been a nightmare, and it's only what 7th. It's the 7th. It's been 1 week, so it's fine.
Do you envision having a co-host down the road, Sarah? Asked Jane.
Matt, the job is not open. I'm kidding. I think all of these episodes, the co-host is the person I'm speaking to, because I want it to be a conversation. I don't want it to just be me asking questions. And as people get more comfortable with this topic, there's still some people that are like, a women in media podcast. So as everything, builds from here, I think there's going to be less straight question and more talking back and forth. That's what my co-hosting will be.
Here's something else that comes to mind when I'm sort of booking guests and trying to think about balance. And that's the difference between, an American audience and a Canadian audience. Are you conscious of that? Is this more of a Canadian podcast? Because I get half of my audience from the US. I feel I have to serve that audience as much by putting American people in there as much as Canadian and European.
I think it's wide open. Like, I have a girlfriend in my neighborhood here who's from Australia, and she's like, oh, there's a story, this woman who's, she's a communications person for da-da-da. She's talking about someone to bring on from Australia. Like, it could very well happen, but I am taping with an American SiriusXM employee. Her name is Rita, and she's the program director for a bunch of pop channels in the US. And she's like 10 years younger than me and just killing it. So yeah, this week we're gonna chat. And while I think our stories are very different, and even the landscape we come from for media is very different, I'm so excited to hear what's the same, if that makes sense.
It does. I love this idea, and I love the fact it's just going to be cross-border and global, and you can bring anyone from anywhere on. I think that's fantastic. I'm looking forward to this. And
thank you for convincing me. That I said to Matt, I think it was a week ago, I said, yeah, it's just going to be a season of 6 or 8 episodes. And you were like, hold on a second. And very quickly I've realized even it's only been a couple days. This thing published on Thursday, that was when I announced it. And already I've got a full page of names that need to be attended to. So no, this is not just 6 or 8 episodes, and I'm really pumped.
Once you get to 6 or 7, more stories are going to come in, and then you're going to find the show is going to, change and sway as you think it will be. I know I love people that go, I'm going to do a season. And I go, what are you, Dallas? Are you the Love Boat? We're just going to do the Sopranos. You're one season. These people who talk in seasons, they make me nuts.
Well, even going live on Facebook right now, I the last time I went live on this page might have been at a patio broadcast with FM 96. So we're talking a long time ago already. And even that idea, I was like, who the hell do I think I am right now? Eddie Vedder? I'm going live on Facebook. I don't know. So I know
it's astounding that just where we are and where we're at and what we're doing and the audiences that you reach now. I'm excited. I think this is a great idea. I couldn't believe when I took a look at it, just women in media as a podcast. There's a big hole in there for you to go and to put the podcast into that in that space. I know that the background in radio that you have, we would look for format space. Well, there's some space in here for you.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. Well, thanks for all of your help and sort of leading me to what became, the final vision. I have really appreciated your help. By the way, Matt oversees a lot of podcasts. So
yes, sometimes it's like a nursery and other times it's like a big party.
Sounds like, yeah. Kind of like a farm sometimes.
Here's the ask, by the way. Please follow all the social media for it's Women in Media Pod is what you've tagged it as, correct?
Yes. Women in Media Pod. And on Facebook, it's facebook.com/Women in Media Pod.
Cool. Sarah, so good to speak to you again.
You too. Thank you for everything.